Hello and welcome to the narrated PowerPoint on accepting credit cards. And we also are going to look at a lease and what that entails. So accepting credit card payments, you're all going to want to do this. This is a fact of modern life. Most people have credit cards or a debit card of some sort. Pretty obvious. And so there are four different ways that you can accept those payments. And you're probably familiar with some or all of these. Well, one is a point of sale terminal. Another one is a mobile credit card processor, a credit card terminal, or an online payment system. So let's go through those. A point of sale is a credit card swiper that goes directly into your cash handling system. So, what is your cash handling system? Well, for most of us, that's going to be built into our EHR. So, for ChiroTouch that we use at the school, there's a front desk area that you guys don't see that the cashier uses when she collects money and applies it to a certain patient's account. And so, if you have a POS system, and ChiroTouch has one of these, and I'm not sure about the others, but they all have a way of handling cash. But you're either going to have to put in manually the credit card transactions, or they'll feed directly in, which is what a POS is. So ChiroTouch's additional module will allow you to slide that credit card, put in the transaction amount, and then it will directly feed into your bookkeeping system or EHR. Okay, that is one of the great things about that. That's really nice. One of the potential downsides of that is that what if that credit card information is stored internally when it gets swiped, and that can become a liability issue in case there's a data breach of some kind. So if you go that route, you always want to ask that question. You want to make sure that the system is not storing any of those credit card numbers into your location, the system, your software on your computer. Next is a credit card terminal. That's what we see just about everywhere. So it's a little separate box that has paper that comes right out of it. That's going to be what you sign. You'll swipe the card or stick the card in it, and the chip will read, and then it will print out the receipt. The patient will sign, or customer, and then they'll get a copy. You'll get a copy. Those are separate. So what you'll do is key in that information. What I mean by separate is separate from your EHR. You'll key in that information into your EHR, into the cashiering side of it for the correct patient. So if Mrs. Jones is in front of you and she pays $25 on credit card, you'll go to Mrs. Jones's account and you'll put in a $25 credit card transaction. Because at the end of the day, all of this needs to balance. If you had $1,000 in charges and you collected $300 in cash, you need to count all your cash, look at all your credit charges, and make sure it all adds up. You might throw into their gift certificates or any other forms of payment as well. Online payments, PayPal, Venmo, all kinds of ways to do that. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, you're going to be putting this in manually unless someone comes up with an interface to allow for, a PayPal or a Venmo or something like that to directly go into the cashiering side of your EHR. Credit card merchant rates. Okay, this tends to be, what are merchant rates? Well, if you're going to accept credit card services, and merchant rates or merchant services means the same thing. There are different ways that is done. An interchange plus pricing, tiered pricing, and flat percentages. And I must admit that I'm not the expert in this, but I can give you enough information because it's what I've used in practice. And really, honestly, if you look at interchange and tiered and you compare the companies on purpose make it very difficult to do apples to apples comparison based on things called interchange plus rates, tiered pricing rates. So when I say that I can't explain it all, it's because I don't know the intricate details of it, the ins and outs. I really just know boiling it down to the basics of what it means to me as a business owner, and that's what I'm going to do for you. So interchange plus rates, known as wholesale pricing, true pricing, and cost plus. It's the preferred choice because it gives the businesses the same low rates used by the big box stores, which is nice. Um, when a bunch of stores that have a lot of money band together, they tend to have leverage. And so if you can get an interchange plus rate, that tends to be your best rate. And the way that they handle it with small businesses is they'll just charge a flat fee that consists of a small percentage plus a few cents per transaction. Tiered pricing. This depends on the type of credit card being used. So this is where those great miles cards as a consumer, things like that, who pays for that? It's the business. So you might get charged a whole lot more if someone uses their miles card, for example. This pricing structure is less favorable because it works by bundling different types of credit cards into tiers with increasing swipe rates. These tiers are classified as qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified cards. These include regular cards, debit cards, rewards cards, business cards, and other types of credit and debit cards. And generally, credit card processing companies decide which types of cards are qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified for their particular service. So tiers and pricing will vary greatly based on who you ask. So this is why if you were to look at someone's statement that they get from their credit card company each month, and let's say there's 1,000 transactions on there, I mean, it looks like Greek. I mean, you have no idea what it's talking about because there are different tiers, different rates being charged dependent on the type of card. And really, at the end of it, you look at it and you say, okay, for $1,000 or 1,000 transactions this month or $10,000 in business, what percentage did I pay? And that's how you would compare apples to apples when comparing rates or plans to one another. Flat percentage. So this is going to be like Square on using, a little dongle that goes into a phone and that you swipe that way. A flat fee, 2.75, 2.7 per swipe. Those are pretty competitive rates. It's simple. I like these. There's no problem using something like that. A lot of people do. Takes all of the guesswork out of it as well. So the chip cards are becoming standard, and I think at this point we all know that there's more security built in for the chips as well. So red flag rules. So this is becoming a bigger and bigger deal, which is identity theft, fraud, people hacking into your system, and securing all of that information is becoming more and more burdensome every year. So you will want to talk to whoever it is that does your merchant services, or if it's just even Square, and find out what your protection is when it comes to protecting, or what your responsibilities for protection are when it comes to protecting this information. What's their level of encryption that they have? There are also additional insurances available in case of a data breach, which I also highly recommend looking into. Who should you look into? Well, those with, or who should you check with? I would check with whoever it is you are planning to do your malpractice insurance through. They NCMIC, for example, is in the insurance business. So they don't just do malpractice insurance. They do a lot of different kinds of insurance. So I would recommend talking to them. Businesses count as creditors if they do the following, in addition to deferring payments for goods and services. Receive or use consumer reports in connection with a credit transaction. Give information to credit reporting companies in connection with a credit transaction, or advance funds. So really, what does this mean? This basically means if you are not collecting payment, and this is a state-to-state law. It varies by state to state. But if, let's say, Mrs. Jones comes in and you say, don't worry about it this month, we'll get you next month. And then Mrs. Jones comes in the second month and says, I forgot my credit card, I'll get you next time. And you say, okay, no problem, Miss Jones. In some states, if you go past, let's say, 90 days, you're being looked at as you're running your own credit company, or perhaps insurance company. There are laws that say that as well. If you're providing health care but not charging for it, then you must be providing insurance. And if they look at you in those ways, a whole host of rules and regulations can be applied to you, saying, well, you're acting as an insurance provider, therefore, here's what you need to comply with. Or you're acting as a creditor, here's all of the rules you broke and didn't comply with. And I don't say this to scare you, I just want you to know. That's why it's important to have these policies in place so that you are not extending credit to people beyond a reasonable time, and that's typically 90 days. And we talked about that there. Specific rules there with the Federal Trade Commission, what that looks like is there. More talking about if a business meets the creditor definition and you having to have a program. Again, you don't want more burdensome rules and regulations to have to comply with. I would say in healthcare we have enough. So just make sure that your policy for your financial policy keeps you from having to get into the business of being a creditor. And that is it for this particular presentation. Let me go back out. And let's look at the next thing I wanted to show. I won't get into Kansas sales tax. Sales tax varies from state to state. That's an old presentation I used to give, but I have not given it recently. This is what I did want to look at, though. This is pretty standard no matter what state you are in. Let's just go through this lease, take about 10 minutes to do it, and just talk about some of the terms and the things you will find in a lease. So at the top, it's saying that what it is. It's a commercial lease agreement. And it's giving the dates that the agreement is in effect and who it's between. So BFD Enterprises is the landlord, quotes there to define that, and Professional Spine Center Chiropractic is the business, and that's the tenant. When you see it in quotes like that, it means that whenever you see that talked about later, if someone refers to landlord, it's making it very clear that they mean BFD Enterprises in this situation. And when they say tenant, they're making it very clear that they are referring to a Professional Spine Center Chiropractic without typing that out every single time. Okay, so premises and term. The landlord leases to tenant and tenant leases from landlord. The following described premises or leased premises in the city of Baldwin City, Douglas County, Kansas. And this is the address, and it's 1,200 square feet. So in the lease, it's dictating that it's to be used only for a chiropractic office for that term, 3 years and 6 months. Okay? Lease year or year, they're talking about not a calendar year that would run from January through December, but a year, meaning whenever the date that it starts through the 12-month period. Okay? In this case, they are charging a base rent, and this is very, very common, what base rent is. So we're going to get into what goes on top of base, but the tenant shall pay to landlord a total of $48,216 as base rent in monthly installments payable on the first day of each month of the term hereof in advance without abatement, deduction, or offset as follows. So that's the total amount, that $48,000 and some change that you will pay over that entire period. Okay? Next, it says in expenses only. What is that? Well, it has a couple of different names, aliases or AKAs, but here in red is the definition. A triple net lease, or in, is a lease agreement on a property where the tenant or lessee agrees to pay all the real estate taxes, building insurance, and maintenance. You'll also hear maintenance being described or called as CAM charges, common area maintenance. So if you see CAM in all caps in a lease, that's what that means. The common area is exactly what it says. It's the parking lot, it's the sidewalk out front, it's any ashtrays that are out front, it's a main sign that's in front of the building that benefits all of the tenants. But those, if there's grass that needs to be mowed or landscaping, maintaining all of that in the common area would be a CAM charge or maintenance fee. Okay, so it could also be any additional normal fees that are expected under the agreement, like rent or utilities or other things like that. So you'll typically see base plus triple net. All right, and I'm not going to read all of this. This gets into a 10% late fee. So you're going to see that in most leases. Possession, that's when you're going to take possession. Additional rent. In addition to the payment of base rent, as herein provided, tenant shall pay to landlord during each lease year additional rent of 9.09% share of landlord's real estate taxes, property insurance, and common area maintenance. So there's that triple net. So that's an additional 9% essentially. The estimated first year charges shall be $385 a month. So that's going to be on top of the base rent. Now, another thing that's important to realize is if you're looking at brand new construction, and I don't mean finishing the inside of your space, but I mean if the building is new, it usually takes about a year or two for property taxes to be evaluated and then put in action or applied. So, a lot of times what you'll see is when you're responding, if you've got a commercial realtor or you're just looking at a sign, or you're online like loopnet.com, a place like that where you can look at commercial properties, it will have a really, really low estimate of what those taxes are going to be. But they're almost always lowballed. And then once they're actually assessed and applied, you're going to pay a lot more than that. So when you look at that, keep that in mind. You might be looking at a brand new property saying, this looks really cheap because look how low the taxes are, and just wait till they get assessed and suddenly they won't be cheap anymore. Just something to look out for. A deposit, you probably know what that is if you've ever rented an apartment, but a lot of times it's first and last month's rent. In this case, it looks like just 1 month, 1,300. Insurance, you are required to keep insurance on the building. Um, so let's read through this. Tenant shall comply with all insurance regulations so that the lowest rates for fire, lightning, explosion, extended coverage, and liability insurance may be obtained by landlord. Nothing shall be done or kept in or on the premises by tenant which will cause an increase in the premium. So you can't also have your, I don't know, your ammunition making business going on in there as well. And this isn't a problem for, I would say, all of us. Maybe there's a few people that have some chemicals in there that might be questionable in their offices, but I would say by and large that our business doesn't have a lot of dangerous things in it. And there is property insurance. I think we'll get to that later, that you will be required to pay for. You might see the word indemnify. In fact, you will see it in a contract with a landlord, and it just means that someone won't hold someone else responsible for a loss. So here it's saying indemnity and public liability. Tenant shall save landlord harmless from all loss, liability, cost, or damages, including without limitation, attorney's fees and the cost to enforce this lease in bankruptcy that may occur or be claimed with respect to any persons, corporation, property, or chattels. I don't know what that is. Non-compliance with federal, state, local government, quasi-government law. So this is just a huge blanket umbrella statement saying that you will not hold your landlord financially responsible for a whole list of things, and they're listing that all out for you here. Signs. This may or may not be addressed in the one that you get with a landlord in the agreement you sign, but more than likely it would be addressed. Tenant shall not put upon or permit to be put upon the premises any signs, billboards, or advertisements without the written consent of landlord, which shall not be unreasonably withheld. And that the tenant has to pay for everything. That's pretty standard. But if they have a look, a theme in their particular, let's say a strip mall, this happens a lot. They want no signs bigger than 2 feet, nothing wider than 8 feet. And so it has to fit within that. Maybe they all have to be backlit. So they want to make sure that whatever your design is going to fit with those standards. Acceptance, maintenance, and repair by tenant. And so when you return the premises back to the landlord, it needs to be in the same condition you're getting it in. And they'll usually, if you're going to knock down a wall, they might want you to get their permission to do it. But let's see what it says here. Tenant has inspected and knows the condition of the premises and accepts the same in their present condition, subject, however, to the rights of present or formal occupant or occupants, if any, to remove movable property if the terms commences after the date set forth above. Tenant shall take good care of the premises and the equipment and fixtures located in or on the premises, including heating, electrical, plumbing, air conditioning equipment, and shall keep them in good working order and condition, including without limitation, protecting water pipes, heating, electrical, air conditioning equipment. So the burden of maintaining all of this is on the tenant. Landlord shall keep the premises and all approaches, sidewalks, alleys adjacent to premises, if any, clean. So they're taking care of everything outside. Tenant shall be responsible for replacement of furnace filters on a quarterly basis, light bulb replacement, and janitorial of its suite. So this varies depending on what you're doing. Leasing in Colorado, I was the chiropractor and I was the lead janitor. In my office out here in Prairie Village, I'm in a building that doesn't have restrooms right in my office. They're down the hall, and that's all maintained by a company that comes in. It's a cleaning company. Same with the office. They come in and vacuum. Same with the light bulbs. Those were all, in any furnace filters. That's all taken care of in my lease agreement out here in Prairie Village, but in Colorado, that was all on me. Two other things while we're on this subject of maintenance. I would add to this particular agreement that I'm not responsible for any of the plumbing that's below slab, and that is the term meaning that it's below the concrete in your space. Why is that? Well, let's say there's a restaurant next door and they keep pouring grease down the pipes and it clogs and backs up into your space, and the clog is below your slab, and now they're going to tell you you're responsible for that. I can tell you that jackhammering concrete to get to plumbing, then fixing the plumbing, then putting new concrete down and new flooring over that is an expensive thing, and that should not be on you. That should be on the landlord. Or the business next door, but really it shouldn't be on you at all. I would change it to say you're responsible for above slab plumbing. So what is that? That's clogged sinks, clogged toilets, things you can typically do with a plunger or a roto-rooter. The other thing is that you need to know what it costs to repair an HVAC unit. What is that? HVAC is heating, air conditioning, ventilation. And so a lot of them are rooftop mounted, and they can be $2,500 or so to replace, and they can be damaged by water. So rain too much can do that. That's a big chunk. Not only would you be out, the air conditioning for your patients in the summer months, waiting to get that fixed, you're also out the $2,000 or $3,000 it would cost. I would at the very least have that split between you and your landlord. But ideally that should all be on the landlord. Okay, that would be maybe a point of negotiation if it were in your agreement. Okay, maintenance and repair by landlord. Here we go. Landlord shall warrant the HVAC system for the first year of occupancy. Tenant's out-of-pocket expense shall be $1,000 per calendar year, so long as tenant has quarterly maintenance program in place. So it's not defining whether that's on you or an outside company. But it looks like they're only going to be helping you out the first year according to this agreement. Okay? Landlord's right of entry means that they have a key. They can come in anytime they want. Usually they'll coordinate this with you as not to disturb operations of your business, but they own the property, and maybe they have to go in there with the fire department or something like that to do an inspection. Damage by casualty. If the premises or the building of which the premises are a part shall be destroyed or shall be so damaged by fire or other casualty as to become untenable, then in such event, at the option of the landlord, the term of this lease shall cease. So if something happens that damages that building to where you cannot conduct business in it, then that's pretty much going to end this lease. Personal property, it's not the landlord's responsibility for if your business gets broken into or something happens, regardless of the cause or damage. Alterations. Tenant shall not make any alterations or additions in or to the premises without the prior written consent of landlord, which shall not be unreasonably withheld. So this is what I was talking about earlier. If you want to knock down a wall or do something, you should run that past the landlord first and get it in writing to make sure that they don't have a problem with it. Utilities and service. Tenant shall furnish and pay for all electricity, that's supposed to say, gas, water, fuel. So this breaks it down how that's going to work, that all these utilities are not on the landlord. I can tell you again, in my Colorado office, the way that they had that set up was they took the total, and then it was split between 5 businesses, and they just split it evenly, which wasn't so great for us because we were 2 doors down from a pizza place, and I can tell you, cooking pizzas all day uses a lot more gas and electricity and water than it does, running a chiropractic office. But that's how it was set up there. So that's going to vary. Yep, you have to comply with public laws. Fixtures, all repairs, alterations, additions. What am I seeing here? Yeah, okay, fixtures. That means that if it comes time for you to leave, you can't take the fixtures with you. What is a fixture? It tends to be whatever's attached. So, meaning the lighting. You can't say, I really paid for these beautiful lights and I'm going to take them all out with me. Or if you happen to be a hair salon and you have some sinks built into the wall, you can't say, I'm taking all these sinks out. It needs to be rentable to the next person, and so you just can't basically strip it of all of those things and take them with you. Eminent domain, it means that if they want to put, if the government wants to put a highway down through the middle of that building, the government has the right to come and say, we're not going to do that. Here's some money for your building. Y'all got to get out of here. So this is just talking about that. Subrogation is a term that you might see in these. What does it mean? Assuming the legal rights of a person for whom expenses or a debt has been paid. So let's say that you've got a patient. This happens with patients. It gives you the right to, on behalf of a patient, to go after the insurance company to try to get money for them. Or an attorney can do that as well, okay? And you'll see that talked about in leases. Waste, nuisance, and interference with other tenants. It means basically you're just going to be a good citizen. You're not going to be really loud or have bizarre smells coming out of your business or whatever that disturbs other businesses around. Okay? My story with that, and I'll keep it brief because we're not in person to tell this, is that next to me were 2 things. When I first moved in, it was a karate studio. And so during the day, it was adults beating each other with sticks, is what it sounded like. And they would slam up against the wall. And we happened to share a wall with our massage therapist who was in our space. And it was just a little unsettling. But people kind of got used to it. And we had, background noise and music playing to sort of cover it up. But when a grown man, after, having a stick battle, gets knocked into the wall, it sort of shakes the artwork. And then they moved out, and we thought, good, hopefully things are going to get better. And what got put in next was a kids' music school. And so that was interesting as well. But in both cases, we didn't complain. It wasn't that disruptive. Default, this governs what's going to happen if either party defaults on this, or if the tenant defaults, not either party. Holding over, if you stay there past the time, your lease expires and you haven't signed a new lease, then you're going to pay 125% more of what the last rate was in this particular agreement. So that's going month to month. Some people will say 125%. Some will say 200%. Some will say, hey, I'm not going to charge you more. You can go month to month. Just depends. Notices, subordination. In the event landlord holds title to the premises by virtue of a lease, then this sublease is and shall remain in effect to all the terms and conditions being underlined. It's not that important right now. Successors. Privatization. You're going to be quiet. Bankruptcy. So these just get into really what's called boilerplate or standard language. It's not really customized. It's just governing what happens if people go bankrupt, what happens, who are agents who are working on people's behalf. So in this particular one, it's a commercial real estate company who is an agent for the landlord. And there's the leasing company there. This is saying this whole thing represents the entire agreement. No amendment or waiver. Again, this is all standard boilerplate. If you get in a disagreement you're saying where you wish to have that done. So in this one, it says Douglas County for the state of Kansas or in United States District Court. So it would keep it in Kansas. So let's say you moved and you went to San Diego, and now there's legal action between the two parties. This is establishing that it's going to stay in Kansas. Further agreement. All the things that the tenant is going to do at their own expense. So they're going to do some repainting for you. So this is not on the landlord, and that's making it very clear. You'll find that in tough financial times, when there's a lot of, it's just supply and demand, right? If there's a huge supply of spaces and not much demand, then you have leverage as someone who's going to sign a lease. And you can say, well, if you would do all these things, repaint the inside, put in some flooring, some new lighting, give me some walls and install my x-ray machine, then I think I would sign your 5-year lease. If that's not the case, and that landlord has 10 people a day wanting in there, and that landlord could pretty much charge whatever they want, then that's going to be on you. So this is just like it is in any other free market system, the housing market, real estate market, whatever. It's no different. An option term, so long as tenant is not in material default, so as long as you're not defaulting, you have the option to renew this lease for a term of 2 years or 5-year periods at a rate. So they're going to reassess, it would change the financial, what the monthly payment would be and all of that. Okay, that's pretty much it. You're going to sign at the end, both parties. They may or may not have this done by a notary, which is where you sign in front of someone who's certified as a notary public, and then they just put a little stamp on there to say that they witnessed both parties, they looked at your IDs, and it's all official. So that is it.